the sort of glib manner, the almost giddy excited manner in which some people are discussing the military activity, it is potentially going to, I don't know, rebound perhaps when other nations feel that they can do the same thing.
I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick Maguire. He's written another cracking column today, and we've got lots of things to kick around with him. We're going to start, though, with conflict in the Middle East. Israel launched a big attack on Tehran overnight, and the US had said its strikes are about to surge dramatically. Here's the American Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth.
We have only just begun to fight, and fight decisively. If you think you've seen something, just wait. The amount of combat power that's still flowing, that's still coming, that will be able to project over Iran is a multiples of what it currently is right now when you add up our capabilities and those of the Israeli Defense Forces.
Well, reacting to that's always going to be tough, and we've got plenty of time to talk to Patrick Maguire this morning. But Patrick, just give us a flavour. Has it been, a particularly bad week for Keir Starmer, or has he ended okay? Or is he, as I was raising at the top, has he actually acted in a way which in the short term looks a little bit, flaky, but in the long term may look wise?
I think, Guto, calling it a bad week, and I'm never shy from saying Keir Starmer's had a bad week. I think it wouldn't necessarily be fair to use that language because it's been a reminder this week of the limitations of modern Britain's role in conversations such as this, particularly when you have the Americans deciding to effectively freelance on these questions of international law. And Keir Starmer initially responded in the only way he was ever going to respond, in putting international law first, although he had that remarkable story by Tim Shipman earlier in the week revealing the extent of divisions within his cabinet over letting the US use their bases. And what I would say, it's been quite a confusing week in terms of what the government is in favour of and why. I think it's been a slightly embarrassing week, not because of anything Keir Starmer's done, but because of what it's revealed to us about the capacities of our military and the British state. I think having a charter flight in Oman that couldn't even take off to evacuate people back to Britain the other night was clearly a bit of a low point. And of course, we have the overarching question, and I think basically any prime minister who wasn't willing to join Donald Trump's initial action, and I think most prime ministers wouldn't, we're in a place where actually there are big questions over some of Britain's most durable international alliances, not just the US. Look at what the Cypriot High Commissioner said about our failure to defend the base. Look at what the Gulf nations, again, very reliable allies of the UK, have been saying. So it's been a bad week for Britain, and how much of it is Keir Starmer's fault, I think, is open for debate. But it's bigger than Keir Starmer, this. It's about Britain's place in the world.
Right, we'll come back to that, plenty to chew over. But first of all, let's just get a sense of where we are militarily out there. And pleased to have Dr. Andrew Curtis on the line. He's a former RAF Air Commodore, and he's now an Associate Fellow of the think tank RUSI. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking at the Times today. There's a fantastic sort of before and after sequence of photographs taken from on the ground, or taken of the ground, rather, in Iran. How much damage has actually been done?
So thanks very much for having me on. I think a lot of damage has been done in terms of the bombing campaign by both the Israeli Defense Force and the United States military. But in terms of gauging the success of activity to date, I'm not sure that's a particularly good indicator of the success of the operations at the moment. Just looking at the amount of rubble in Iran is not really a good way of measurement.
There's talk now of a dramatic surge, all this macho stuff, you ain't seen nothing else, we've only just begun, all this stuff. What do they mean by that? What is the next level in this infliction of pain?
So I think that's very much Pete Hegseth's view of the world. And I think one of the problems with trying to analyse the US approach to this is that most of the major players within the US administration are saying different things. And ultimately, my view is that the only person that you can really listen to is Donald Trump. So when people like Hegseth are saying, you ain't seen nothing yet and there's much more to come, that may be the case. But I think until Donald Trump decides what the next steps are going to be and then tells his people what those next steps are going to be, then people like Hegseth can pretty much say what they want. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen.
What do you make of the tone of the way they're conducting themselves? Because my experience, certainly of senior figures in the British military, is that you were all restrained and respectful. And when you actually have sort of been involved in, frankly, killing people on the other side, there's a sort of respect that this is a necessary evil, if you like, something that has to be done, not the sort of rejoiceful tone. Some of this is like, I've just won a video game. Some of the videos on social media out of the Pentagon and out of the White House. Do you find some of it distasteful?
I do find it distasteful. I think you're exactly right. The understated approach has always traditionally been the way that the West has gone about this activity. And when you consider that the use of military force should be the last resort, that is entirely correct and understandable. I don't believe that those in power in the United States at the moment necessarily see it that way. And I think that their view is that the US military is simply another tool of statecraft for them to use as they see fit. And as a result, their approach and the way that they are discussing the use of military force has changed considerably. I also think that creates a potential long-term problem because the sort of glib manner, the almost giddy excited manner in which some people are discussing the military activity, it is potentially going to, rebound perhaps when other nations feel that they can do the same thing.
Finally, how depressing perhaps has it been just to look at the state of UK armed forces, not questioning the capability of the men and women involved, but the fact that we have one ship that we are trying to get out there and it can't even leave port till next week. We have a handful of planes, not the military thing, but a plane coming out, delayed. We don't look like a nuclear-powered number 2 in NATO, first world military at the moment, do we?
I think that is a problem for the UK government. The military capability that is available to use for UK interests in this situation does appear to be limited. And that, I think, is a worry. I think what is a bigger worry is the fact that the situation has changed in the international community. And what the UK needs is a completely different approach to UK national security. It needs a whole of society approach. The Chief of the Defence Staff mentioned this in a speech last December, that the military can only do so much. The price of peace is rising, and for the UK to play its part, it needs not only a stronger armed forces, but it needs this whole of society approach. And I think until that is recognised at the government level, and the government is prepared to invest in this, then I think we will always see shortfalls in military capability, because the funding that is now required to keep the UK military at the level that it needs to be just isn't there.
Dr. Andrew Curtis, thank you very much for your thoughts and indeed for the sober tone with which you discuss these issues. Much appreciated.